Welcome back to Five Questions. I'm your host, Dustin Pete. I'm so very pumped to share a more recent friend with you today. But before I get into that, I want to remind you to like and subscribe this video or audio platform that you're listening to this on. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and ring the bell. So every time we release one of these interviews, you can be notified about it. If you're listening on a podcast platform, rate and review. That certainly helps our reach. But today, I'm very pumped to share with y'all one of the most high capacity leaders that I've been blessed to come in contact with in the last handful of years, Lee Coate. What's up, man? How are you doing?
Hey, Dustin, thanks for hanging today, man. We don't talk enough, so I guess we got to do more podcasts
Absolutely.
together and then we'll chat. So it's
That's
cool.
that's
Thanks
the
for having me,
modern
bro.
way of hanging. That's the
That's
modern
right.
way of hangouts these days.
Do
I'll
a
be on your
podcast
podcast,
conversation,
you be on my
record it, and then,
podcast,
yeah, it's
and then we
community
can be like, remember,
online.
remember that time that we hung out? We recorded it,
That's
so
great.
you can never forget
Well,
it.
I think that this will be fun. Hopefully, it'll help some folks.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. Lee, if you don't know him, you need to know him. And hopefully by the end of this, you're wanting to know more. But Lee is a part of a network called the Growmentum Group. And what he brings to the table there is 30 years of experience in leadership within the local church, as well as organizations around the country. He's currently the president of Growmentum Group. And his experience has created a wide understanding of strategies alongside his practical work at the Crossing in Las Vegas, which I love to attend one day, where he has served for the past 13 years as the executive pastor. He's got a master in leadership from Fuller Seminary. So what else do you need to know?
Man,
Guys,
Fuller,
brilliant.
come on.
I met Lee maybe right at a year ago now.
Yeah,
Um
that's almost
at
like to the day.
Yeah, at an executive pastors conference that happened to be of all places in New Hampshire, which was
A little
really
strange.
beautiful. It was odd, but it was beautiful. We had a really good time up there. Lee spoke, and I learned from another friend of mine that I've interviewed on here before that um, it's always worth the ask. And so I just went up to Lee afterwards and said, "Would you be willing to coach me?" And we did that for a short stint until my finances ran out. No, I'm just kidding. But but Lee's great. Every time I have a question for him, I can send
For
him a
sure.
text and he answers right back. And I just love his heart for leaders. And so today we're going to dig into his process of coaching these leaders. And so I want to kind of get behind the curtain a little bit of what he does selfishly for me, because as I told Lee very first time I met him a year ago, my question was, how do I
You
get to
did.
where you're at?
You did.
And that's what I'm after. So this is mostly for me, but I think it's going to help a lot of people too. So let's dive right in.
Okay.
Lee, why? We're gonna use Simon Sinek here, and we're gonna start with why, because all good Christians know we're supposed to do that, right?
Well,
So
and I got
why
Simon right. I got Simon right
do you?
behind me here because, like
I
Simon,
got him right over here.
I have a man crush on Simon. So
We do
it's a
too.
great place. It's a great place to start.
The leadership podcast that we do as a church, we release it once a month, and we're convinced that it's secretly sponsored by Simon, because every episode we mention him or one of his books. Anyway, why, Lee, did you choose to get involved in a coaching network? Why coaching?
So it's interesting because I think the question's relevant, especially in an era where probably more than ever, there's two lanes that are happening, right? One is people are really open and there's a culture where we feel the need, whether it's life coaching or leadership coaching or organization, like there's really an openness to the idea of like, I'm not going to do this by myself. I need mentoring. I need outside voices, probably greater than ever. Like I know even getting into ministry 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been a thing, at least officially, right? You may have had some mentors or people, and now it's like almost an expectation or an encouragement.
Yeah.
While at the same time, there's sort of this plethora of people out there that everybody's a coach and everybody thinks they can coach and consult. And I'm not cynical about that at all. I hope your listeners don't think that that's coming through. It's more just an observation that
Mm.
that space is flooded, and I think it requires the individual on the other end to be pretty aware of what they want and who they're getting, right? And so for me, it was kind of a thing where um, I I'm going to say the why in this way. I think the why is my life trajectory has led me to a point where I've changed if you have a life mission statement, people do that, but I've had one and not had one. The one that I'm currently operating on and am pretty committed to is the idea of how am I powerfully positioned by God to influence and serve the person I once was. And so I'd
Mm,
have to unpack that a little bit, but it's the idea of like, I was convinced on the last sabbatical I was gifted that I'm still in the game. I'm not tapping out, but I also have so much in the rearview mirror that if I can take the attitude of through consulting conversations, people like you, how am I powerfully positioned to leverage that to influence and serve the person I once was, right? That season of life, that season of ministry, that season of leadership. And so that really drives me desiring to continue to have as much influence as possible and to do it alongside other guys within Growmentum that I feel like are like-minded and have the same objectives.
man, I love that. I think I definitely sense what you're saying there about kind of everybody feeling like they're a coach, and something that you said there. It's interesting. It's about the third time this has come up this week, and I've had many life statements or life mantras or vision statements or whatever you want to call it. I've had those before, and like a good workout plan, they work really good for a season, right?
Can be helpful. They
I
can be helpful for sure.
they can be helpful. I think they help you really what you're getting into there is again, to throw back to Simon, is to know your why, right? To know
Hmm.
what is it that I'm ultimately after anyway? Because I think a lot of times people jump into hot endeavors or new trends, right? And they think I'm supposed to be doing this because this is the next natural step. Rather, what they should be asking is, what's my next natural step, not the next natural step. And
Where it's
I love
where
how
it's
that
helped
guided you.
where it's helped me, Dustin, in a lot of ways too, is in the different seasons of life that we're all eventually going to find ourselves in, whether we want to or not. Um, it's helped me to actually embrace this season where I believe that my experience and my ability to point those that are maybe at an earlier stage have a lot more energy, a lot more ambition than I do, to point them in the right direction. It helps me to understand, just frankly, my value and my worth in a season where a
There
lot
you
of
go.
guys will get and they'll start kind of reaching for it or grasping for it, right? Because things change, right? Emerging leaders are coming and you feel marginalized. If we can
Yeah.
embrace why we're still very important to the process and to the org and to other orgs, I think that helps me. And again, it's a daily battle, but it helps me emotionally and in my own well being to understand why I'm waking up every day, the why of why I'm waking up every day. If I can
Yeah.
remind myself, like, listen, I'm not as frequently on that front line as I used to be, and I don't really
Yeah.
want to be, but I want to be in a position where I can constantly point what I call warriors. I can point them right to that. Dustin, you're kind of in that
Yeah.
warrior stage. Like, hey, Dustin, here's what I've learned. Here's where I would go. Go. Let me know how that
Yeah.
goes. Every once in a while, right? With my guys that I'm leading on my church staff every day, I've got to put the armor on. I've got to strap the sword on. I've got to get in there. But what I'm learning
Mm.
is after a while, they'll even say to me, like, hey, we're good. You can go ahead and put that sword away for a while and we'll let you know, right? When we
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's cool, right? But you also
It's
need
great.
those times where you're fighting shoulder to shoulder with them because of credibility, etc. But most of the time my role now is to keep going, okay, here's where we're headed. Don't forget where we're headed. And that stretches into the work that I do with other nonprofits, leaders, and churches. It's the same exact thing.
I love that. My second question for you is, how did you get off the ground with this growth momentum thing? I understand you didn't start the company. The company was kind of going before you came in. What did that process look like of you getting involved, and how did that kind of grow from there?
One of the
How did
things that I
Growmentum
think
grow?
you and I like that. And one of the things that you and I have even talked about in our conversations is, and this is going to sound way simple, but hopefully your listeners will grab it. I'm actually having a conversation with a guy here that's looking to kind of step into some stuff. And one of the things that I learned by accident but grabbed onto is the idea that you don't sell yourself as a coach or a consultant. You begin by coaching and consulting.
Mm,
right? And I know you're like, huh? But honestly, I think part of the
you're
trajectory, and
right.
I'll talk about Growmentum as an org, but part of the trajectory in life is if that's something that interests you, you just start doing it and you don't even really initially concern yourself with whatever revenue stream that might bring, whatever that financial value. Obviously that's important down the road and a worker is worthy of his hire. But if you start there, I think it's going to be problematic, especially in the
Mm,
church and nonprofit space, because there tends to be a level of uh, I'll say this carefully, of
mm,
value assessment of everything, right?
mm,
And so if you go in roaring with cost and here's what it is and all that, versus if you're providing value to a certain extent, and then at some point that value is actually pretty obvious to both you and the organization, that's how it works. So for me, it started initially by just relationally providing value, right? Like, hey, I just love it. Like, to me, if you don't love the conversations that you're having where you're mentoring, if that's not a natural thing that you're doing, you probably shouldn't get into this. Honestly,
mm,
like if it's not, if you've got to work hard to do that, if you're not already having those conversations, it's probably something you need to assess. Because typically, guys who are really moving in this space are guys that don't go, I'm going to move into that space. They generally end up in that space and go, huh, this is kind of interesting. What is this supposed
yeah,
to be? And that's kind of what
yeah,
happened with me is like, okay, I'm starting to do this. I got involved with one organization for a while as a freelance. Hey, we've got this guy. Can you call them? So I was really kind of my own independent underneath their umbrella. That was cool. And it was really, really, really what I would term a side hustle at that point. It was like just this little one or two churches over here, guys. But then COVID happened. And I had a good friend named Kate Chung who had already kind of stepped out and put his shingle out and was doing a lot of coaching executive pastor virtually with churches. And he had been bugging me for months. Like, hey, bro, because we're kind of same page guys. Like, hey, you should do this with me. And I'm like, no, no, no. Then COVID happens. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves on the phone, Zoom calls with guys all over the country. And we're just consulting. Again, to your listener, we weren't charging anything. We were just consulting. Like, hey, let's get on the phone. Do you know what you're doing? I don't know what I'm doing. Let's figure this out, right? Are you outside,
yeah,
inside, masking, not masking? What are you doing? And so this wasn't even a company. It was just us helping people, right? And
yep,
through that, we also began to create some content, some IP, some intellectual property that we felt like was unique and helpful. Dustin, you've seen some of that. We pressed some of that out.
yeah,
And so as that started to merge, then we're like, okay, we're giving away the content. And again, I would
yeah,
say that to your guys too, like, and you guys have all heard that, but the truth is like most content people are not going to over the long term probably pay for. And there's a few guys that can do that, but most of us are not those guys. So
yep,
really it's the content drives, here's how I would say it. The content drives the conversation that can lead to the coaching, right? Or the consulting. So content starts conversation, leads to coaching. So we just give content away even today after 3, 4 years of like, here's what our thinking is, our best thinking is. We're doing calls with groups around the country. Dustin's been on some of them. And it's like,
yep,
we're just giving it away because what we found happens is guys go, I like that. I want to talk more about that. How do we get you to come and help us do that? And that's where the
mm,
value add comes in. So I jumped in with Kay right in the middle of COVID. We coached a lot of churches through the COVID conversations. And then out of that, it's kind of strengthened our partnership. And we now have some other consultants that are 1099 that are underneath the umbrella of he and I. Those guys are there because they believe in our thinking, they believe in our IP, they believe in kind of what our trajectory, our core values are. Which again could be another question. I know there's only five, but I think a lot of guys need to kind of figure out what their core value is of their consulting, so they're not just
yeah,
in the same space that everybody else is. But what is it that I
mm,
uniquely bring to this conversation that might be helpful? Because there's
yeah.
plenty of people in the space, but there's also plenty of people who need it. You just have to figure out what is your defining reason to be in that space.
Yeah, I love that. That's why I've started with kind of 5 topics, and I think over time the topics are going to kind of narrow more down, down, down from there as I kind of start to find my voice. Part of this process was just kind of reaching out to people and saying,
Love it.
if I was going to write a TED talk, what would it be? what would it be
That's
about?
good.
And just getting some of that feedback, I probably texted that to half a dozen, or no, sorry, 2 or 3 dozen people, and started to hear back some common themes. And then I go, okay, well, I'm going to lean into these are the same 5 themes that I hear recurring over and over again, and what value I'm bringing to other people, whether they're above me, below me, around me, whatever. And so those are the 5 that I'm going to start kind of pressing into and just see what happens, right? And just give
Mhm.
that stuff away. And I learned that from you. I love content. I just want to reemphasize this one more time for people, because you said it and it's just so powerful. Content will lead to conversation, and that will lead to coaching. Amazing. That's all I needed today. So, but anyway, I want to get to behind every leader. We know behind every leader, there's a multitude of great leaders that have poured into them. So,
Mm.
Lee, who did you learn this coaching process from?
A lot of it, I think, a lot of it for me and what we're doing now is a combination of some people that I don't know, right? The Simon Sinek's of the world, the Patrick
Yes.
Lencioni's of the world, um, even a little bit of the Kerry Newhoffs of the world. That's sort of names
So
that
good.
probably a lot of your listeners know,
Hmm.
have contributed to that. And then I think some exposure to processes like some StratOp processes and some of those things that I think are helpful. I think one of the questions that people that are looking to get in this space need to ask is what are going to be the foundational processes that I'm going to use
Yeah.
that will then morph into my primary value add to the organization or leaders I'm working with, right? Because everybody, whether they like it or not, everything starts with something, right?
Yep.
And so, what is that that it starts with? And then what do you build upon it? Okay. So, again, there's that Ecclesiastes thing, right? Nothing new under the
Yep.
sun. I think it's
Yep.
Ecclesiastes, might be Proverbs. I don't know. I need to read the Old Testament more. But the idea is the same, right? Like, hey, what are the things that we know? And then we build upon them. And I think that's where I would encourage guys to go. I don't need to go recreate the wheel, but I need to figure out what are the things that I'm reading that really resonate that can become primary coaching points for me, right? Like
Yeah.
that I particularly read, like everybody kind of has that sweet spot that they can be a part of. And I think it's important. One of the things that I would be careful to say, I don't know if this is the answer to your question, but I was literally having this conversation at lunch today.
Yeah.
Um,
Go.
I think some of us that are in potentially larger scale or impacting, I'll use the church context, right? You're in a larger church or you're in a prevailing church or you're in a place where maybe there's some things that you're doing. I think those are really helpful in the sense of credibility. I would caution the consultant against using that as your primary coaching point. What I mean by that is, as I go into churches now, because I'm kind of split personality between Growmentum and the Crossing, I actually downplay what we're doing at the Crossing as as a point of conversation. Let me
Yeah.
explain. What I mean is, I'm not sure that people that they want to know that I'm doing that. They're not they're not they're not inviting me into the conversation to bring all of that to them. So
Yeah.
I can't help but have that thread through what I'm coaching them towards. They they are not going to. It's actually in a lot of cases I'm finding a little bit of a put off if I go, hey guys, here's the 4 things we're doing at the Crossing. You need to do these things because it's not contextual. It's not any of that, right? So I'll give you an example, Dustin.
Could be circumstantial too.
Could be. I'll give you an example. So we're doing some things here around trying to dip our toe in digital media stuff, not social media, digital media. Like how do we leverage digital throughout the week? How do we create some additional content that people can access? We're not way out in front of that, right? I'm not going into other churches and going, hey, let me show you, let me play all these videos and all this. They don't want that. But I am going into some
Yeah.
and going, hey, let's talk about digital. What are you doing in digital? Right. So in my mind, I'm playing off of what I'm doing over here, but I'm not, I'm not, I'm not playing that game. So I don't know.
Mm.
Guys can do what
No, that
they
makes
want.
sense.
I'm just personally not that excited about just hearing what somebody else is doing. I want to go a little
Yeah.
deeper and hear what is driving that symptomatically of what you're doing. So that's where I try to
Yeah.
focus. I actually try to do it so hard to get to the point in the relationship where the other guy will say, "Tell me what you're doing." I love when that happens. Like some points they get
Yeah,
so
yeah,
frustrated, right? They're like, "No,
yeah.
just
Just give
tell
me the
us."
answer.
And then I tell them, right? But I love it to be that point where they feel like they've got it. Like I'm
Yeah,
so like
they got to pull it out.
I'm not gonna give you here's the three things we're doing for our Easter follow up. I'm not
Right,
gonna tell you that, right? You need to figure that out in your context.
man. I love that.
I don't remember what the original question was, so sorry.
That's the most Lee answer I've heard because it started to answer and then it got better. So
Just
I'll take
went
it.
off the rails.
You did start to dip in a little bit to my fourth question, which is what
Okay.
is your coaching process? Can you just sum up in 3 minutes or less? What does your coaching process look like? So use me as an example if you'd like. I come up to you
Yeah.
after a conference or a Zoom call or whatever. I say, I want what you got. What happens next?
So there's some I want to back it up. I want to answer your question.
Yeah,
I think
go ahead.
it sort of depends on the coaching bucket that we're or the coaching jacuzzi that we're sitting in together. Okay.
Mm, I
So
love that mental
it
picture.
there you go. I know. Just let's just sit there for a minute. Let's just
Let's
marinate
just let's just
in the
soak
bubbles and the jets. Yeah.
in a
Um,
good soak.
Good soak. What I mean by that is like if you're just like Lee, I need somebody with your experience, with your ministry experience, with your leadership experience. I just want to talk to you every month for an hour, which is what we were doing. Cool. Then I don't really have a process, frankly. I would really allow the individual to drive the conversation. Like literally, I'm
Okay.
going to give you an hour, a couple hours of my time. I'm going to take some notes when we talk and I'm going to circle back. I'm going to text you every once in a while, ask you how it's going. You experience that. Like, well, that's big. I'm a big texter, big check-in guy. That's one of my sweet spots, right? That guys are like, you're crazy. I'm like, nope. Because it's simple, right? If I have clients,
So
there's
simple.
no reason I shouldn't be checking in with them on a regular basis. If I got church guys, they're going to get a text from me Sunday afternoon or Monday morning going, how was the weekend? How was that? If I got a guy that's got a board meeting or a hard conversation, that's where I provide value. But if it's one on one, it's literally going to be you're driving this. I'm going to have a few questions, but I don't have a coaching structure. Maybe I should. I don't because Dustin's world is Dustin's world. Now, do I have resources? Will I say, hey, read this, check this out, do this? Of course, but it's not structured. Now, if in Growmentum, in the Growmentum world, which is the majority of where I'm at, typically what we're doing there is we're coaching a primary individual at the C in the C suite, the executive level, either the lead person or the executive person or both. And we
Okay.
are generally working them through an initial launching process that we call an SMP, which is strategic momentum process that we've created. That's a 2 day team building, analyzing mission, values, vision, strategy in that order. And we're
Yeah.
building out a plan. We give them an online dashboard that they only can access, that they can use with their team to continually hold accountability. There's quarterly objectives that they have. There's a 1 year plan they have with the team, the organization. So then when I'm coaching both a combination of coaching to the plan. I'm coaching to what we said we were going to do. Are we on track or off track? Where are we? Where are there barriers? And I'm also coaching to the problems or the solutions or the lids that I would do with anybody, right? So it's a combination of both, right? I'm having an issue with the staff person. So one of the things that we do in our agreements or our partnerships with people is there's something that we call full access. So part of the
Mhm.
value that you can't even place a time on that I
Yeah.
tell people, I go, listen, I can't quantify this, but you're actually in a relationship with me based on full access. And I don't mean this to sound the way it might sound to some relationships, but if Dustin's in a relationship with Lee, that's a partnership coaching, the ability for you to have full access to me anytime is there's a value add there, right? I'm
Yeah.
about to go in and talk to my student guy and he's a train wreck. Lee, give me two or three things that I need to know. Text me, call me. This isn't our official call of the month. I'm going to
Mhm.
respond to that. And I can't
Yeah.
quantify that. I can't. I don't know what the value is to that. I'm not I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney, I'm not billing you by the conversation, but
Yeah.
holistically our relationship includes that, and when you need it, it's going to be there.
I love it. I love it, man. Yeah, it didn't answer the question, but it did. That's again, classically, I'm for it. Where last question for you. Because again, I know that leaders are learners, and I know that you desire to always be growing yourself as well. Where are you currently gaining insight from? What's currently feeding you?
What's currently feeding me? That's a great question. Um, I'm a fanatical reader,
Yep.
and I'm also a finicky reader. So I'm a fanatical, finicky reader. So I download or buy.
That
I
sounds like a
still buy
book.
a few. I know. I still buy a few books because I'm that guy, right? But
Yeah, gotta have
I've
it.
gotten to the point where I'm getting better with using my little. I've got this little mini now, which I don't even know why, but it's because I take notes on it and I read on it. Right? Plane rides.
Okay.
Um, and so a lot of so if I don't like something I'm reading, I've gotten really good at deleting it, or my wife laughs at me. Literally, I've thrown books in the trash. Like there was a book, I'll throw it out there. There was this book someone recommended to me. It was called Ludicrous. Maybe some of you have read it. Maybe you loved it. It was about Tesla and the origins of Tesla. And I thought, this is going to be amazing. And I was like 50 pages in, and it was like the worst thing I've ever read, both in the writing and just what it was saying. And I just literally walked over, hit the button, and threw it in the trash. Because again, limited time, right? And so
Yeah.
anything Simon's writing, I'm listening to, I'm reading it or listening to it, right? Like
Yeah.
mindedness. Um, anything that's around anything right now that I'm reading that's around alignment is a big deal for me, because right now
Mm,
my big pet peeve is um, with most of my guys that I'm coaching in my teams, I'm learning that alignment drifts quickly and immediately. And so anything that I'm learning right now, I'm trying to equip myself to help other leaders stay in alignment better. We think of alignment like this, right? Like perfect alignment. That
mhm.
never happens. And then we don't want this, which is, misalignment. What I'm
Right.
learning is alignment looks a little bit more like this, even when it's healthy, right?
Yeah.
And
Zigzag.
when you have, but it drifts almost immediately. So I'm trying to learn from people that are talking about it. Cause like when you do a meeting, Dustin, with the team and you're like, we're all on the same page. And then you walk out of the room, you're still on the same page. Nobody's being divisive, but alignment
Right.
immediately begins to decay, right? Until the next time you come together, and then you realign, and then it decays, and you realign, you decay, and you keep making progress. And so, I've been trying to read a lot of stuff. Nothing's coming to me off the top of my head. The trick question by
You're
you,
good.
but trying to read a lot of stuff around specifically alignment, because I think
I love
it's
it.
symptomatic. It's symptomatic of a lot of the problems we have are symptomatic of a lack of that. And here's the
Yeah.
thing:
Totally agree.
alignment is really the level of or the lack of alignment is really revealed both in crisis and in seasons of growth.
Mm,
So when we're in crisis, like are we aligned or not is really like magnified. And when we're growing, actually, like if you're in an organization that's blessed with a lot of growth, more people are coming or more sales are happening. That's also a time where alignment is typically a lot of problematic. The last thing I'll say around where are you getting inspiration? I'm a big reader of autobiographies, and I just love it.
yes. Me
I
too.
just read the one around Lincoln, which was really good. John Meacham wrote that book. I find that to be the most valuable stuff, right? Where you're just
Yes.
reading somebody's life and you're reading it through the filter of what can I learn from their life.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, just so
Yeah.
so so good. And so that would be my go-to. If I had something
That's
that I was reading, it would typically be that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that. And if they're still alive and there's an audiobook version where they're the ones reading it to you, it's like my new favorite. I love it.
Bro, Bono,
Oh yes, that's on my
great
list. It's on my
great
on
stuff.
my on,
Great
on my
stuff.
audiobook list.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I think
his
he reads it on the audiobook, and the music that he's
mhm,
talking about plays behind it or something crazy
plays
like
behind
that.
it. Yeah. Yeah, it
Yeah,
does. I've
so
listened to a
I mean,
sample of it and I was like, "Yep."
he's super sharp guy too. And you go, well, I don't know what Bono has to do with leadership or any of that. There's some of it there, it's threaded in there. You know what I mean? Like
For
you
sure.
gotta dig in it. I actually would rather, again, editorial rant from the guy that's been around. I would rather read something that's a little more subtle than the guy that writes the book that's like, here's 8 ways to lead better.
Yeah, I hate those. 8 ways, 5 ways,
It's like,
6 ways.
just stop already. You know what I mean?
Just
Like
tell me your story and where
leadership
you failed in this.
leadership
Yeah,
is way more nuanced and complex than just that,
situational.
you know. Yeah,
Yeah,
and again, John Maxwell's already written that book 10 times. It's a great book. Go
yeah,
read it. But
yeah.
tell me a little bit more. So, sorry, that was a free rant.
I love that rant. I'm for that rant. And when you write that book, I'll write the preface. Cool. So, Lee, thank you so much for your time, man. I want to value your time. I want everybody to know where they can
Appreciate it.
follow you at. If you're watching along on YouTube right now, you can see it pop up. But at Lee Coate, I'm saying your last name right, right?
Yeah,
Lee's
that's
Coate.
right.
Yeah,
Yep.
I thought so. Lee Coate. So at Lee Coate, Coate. I'll put the link in the show notes as well for those that are listening. And then you can follow along with everything that he's doing with the Growmentum Group at growmentumgroup.com. Favorite business name ever. I tell people, I have a friend of mine who's a part of a group called the Growmentum Group. How awesome is that? And they go, I don't know what they do, but I love it.
But I like the name.
I love the name. It's my favorite. Y'all check them out, growmentumgroup.com. Check out anything that they're doing. Are you going to be at the executive pastors thing here in a couple weeks?
You know what, Dustin? We have some guys that will be there. Brandon Beard will be there from the Gromentum
Gotcha.
guys. Um, Quick story as we wrap up.
Let's go. Yeah.
My wife and I have been infatuated with walking the Camino in Spain for a number of years, which is like a 30-day pilgrimage walk thing. And
Yeah.
so we had scheduled to walk for about half of it. You don't have to do the whole thing, back in
Okay.
2020. But then there was this thing, you might have heard of it. There was this pandemic thing that happened. And so
Yeah.
it didn't happen. And so we're recording this on a Wednesday. A week from this recording, I'll be there and we're going to do the last 10 days of that. And so it's going to be her and I disconnected. So unfortunately, it's amazing, but I won't be with you in Dallas, but I'm sure it'll be a
Yeah.
phenomenal time.
Yeah, man, I'm gonna miss seeing there, but I'll love catching up with any other Grow Minimum guys that are there. So, again, Lee, thank you so much for your time, so much wisdom. I could talk to you for hours about this stuff. I really appreciate it, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you having me.